So just talk a little bit about packing. I'm going to go through kind of the basic steps here today, right now, and then we're going to break it down in each step and talk about why we do each step, how important it is, kind of where it ranks in the whole scheme of things. This is a little bit about me and my background here. The important part here is that we've designed a lot of wings. I've done a lot of pack jobs over the years. I've watched tens of thousands of deployments frame by frame. So I've got a pretty good idea about what does and doesn't matter and the trends that we see in how we're packing and how things parachutes open. I've also used some of the packing stuff that we do to help us develop a numerical model for the qualitative analysis of openings. So that's and having a set standard pack job that doesn't vary has been really important in that, so we can weed out what is what. So a little bit about what the rules say is that these the CFRs, or the FARs as they were formerly known. Main parachute must have been packed within 180 days before its date of use by a rigger or the person making the next jump on the parachute, or a non-certified packer under the direct supervision of a rigger. So basically, you should be packing. The person making the next jump is probably the best person to be making that next pack job. Well, why do we pack a parachute? So we can do another jump, right? Yeah, but a lot of it is technically we're trying to get the wing out of the container and out into the airstream cleanly, and in a way that allows for an in-sequence, properly staged deployment that is hopefully soft, controllable, and ultimately results in a fully functional parachute. If your pack job is doing all of those things, it's doing a pretty good job, I'd wager. If you learn how to pack well, it will be the single biggest payoff for longevity in the sport, I think. In my experience, people that are really, really good packers stick around. And they stick around because they don't get hurt as often. They don't have as many cutaways. They don't have as many incidents. And so many people I see now don't treat it like an important skill that's part of being a successful skydiver, but it is. Taking this under your realm of responsibility and treating it as something that you need to know to become a quality skydiver is really important. It's as important as learning how to do a good swoop turn or getting really good at angle flying or any of that. I would urge everybody to become a perfectionist and make packing something that every single jump you take time to make it better. And you take time to get better at it, because if you're not trying to do your best and you're create a perfect pack job every time, you'll start accepting less than okay. And that's where the problems usually start popping in. And that kind of aligns in my last line here is never accept a less than ideal pack job ever. Stop, redo that step. I do it all the time. I'm packing tons of sketchy parachutes that maybe nobody's ever jumped before, and we're routinely jumping stuff like that here in DeLand, and we're just not getting weird malfunctions because we take our time and do a good pack job. And when something isn't right, we stop and redo it. So if you watch what we're doing here, I promise that if you learn to do this, the quality of your openings on any parachute should go up. Definitely on Fleet Wings products. So we're kind of going to break it down into these basic steps, and we're not going to cover all these because some of them don't pertain to the actual parachute. But first thing we're going to do is clear the lines, flake the wing, position the nose and the leading edge. We're going to position the slider. We're going to pull the tail up and roll it and wrap it. We're going to fold it and place it in the deployment bag, and then we're going to stow the lines. As for closing the container, that's kind of a container-specific thing, and we're not really going to talk about that today. Not as much. It's a pretty small detail in the pack job, and it's better covered by your container manufacturer. So I don't want to step on toes and tell people what needs to be done there. So clear your lines. Well, I want you to, when you clear your lines, you're going to lay the wing flat on the ground. Put the rig so that it's facing like it's flying at the ground, like everyone does. Locate your brake lines, split the brake lines, the A's and B's, and the C's and D's into different spots in your hands and walk them up. I generally pull back the slider at the top to check and make sure, or if you're using a removable slider, run the lines before you put your slider on, and you can check and see if there's any tangles or a step through or anything like that. Just kind of watch. Here's a recording of me doing this. This is a pack job I jumped a couple weeks ago. So walked it up, stop. I'm checking the cascade points on the brakes there, checking that they're even. So you can kind of walk those through the slider. Make sure that you don't have any tangles. Get it nice and clear. That's clearing the lines. That line tension you see should be kept throughout the pack job. So next, let's talk about the flaking. This is the big part that a lot of people seem to struggle with. So we're going to take a little bit of time and talk about it. It is one of those things that requires a little bit of taking some time and understanding the wing, mainly understanding the difference between your A lines, your B lines, your C lines, and your D lines, and how to see it in the pack job. It's usually pretty easy because your A lines are going to be the shortest lines in general, and then it's going to stair up from there. B's a little bit longer, C's longer than that, and the longest ones are going to be your D's usually. So when you flake the wing out, you want to shake the whole thing out, kind of pull it out, and get it a little bit chordwise oriented after you've counted your inlets. And you're going to use that time when you've spread it out to the chord here to look at the difference and find the difference between your A and B lines here. So let's watch the video and I'll kind of talk you through. Well, shoot, my video is not loading on this one. I'm going to pull that up real quick and get you guys another view of that video. So hold on one sec, if you will. All right. I'm going to stop presenting and share that video real quick. You can see here, I'll go ahead and count out my cells. You notice I don't use the same spot on every cell. I just go between line tabs to find that spot where I'm going to count out my cells. In this case, this is 9 cells. I grab them all, and you see right there, I've grabbed near on the inlets, kind of set all the inlets even, and then I'm pulling out, trying to capture the A lines and separate them from the B lines. See one slipped away from me there. See now I've now isolated the A lines from the B lines. And that's going to allow me right there to get in there and pack. So I can now see the difference between my A's and B's. You can see right there. And that's a free spot now. That if you're going to flake one part of your parachute, this is the single biggest and single most important part of flaking. This and the next group. This group allows you to flake it so that you can control your inlets and control your nose during packing. The flake between the C's or B's and the C's allows you to control your slider during opening. So people who just shake and skip all the flaking are missing the chance here to really dial this part of your opening in. So once I've kind of orientated myself here and I've got everything pulled away. When I flake, I don't leave everything hanging. I kind of pull the C's and D's away so I can count between them. Same thing with the on a 9 cell like this. You're just going to count out the cells either side. And then you see how I kind of stop there and I push that back in. I'm helping create that fold, right? So I've created the flake, but I want that to reflect on the outside of the wing. And so I go ahead there and I chop that in a little bit, chop that one in a little bit. Okay. I'm going to kind of do the same thing here on the next cells too. So I'm just showing you the AB flake again. Chop that in. Now I've got the C's and D's exposed. And again, I help make that fold nice and clean so that I have a real flake and a real fold there. Obviously, you have to uncollapse your slider on every jump. It would be really bad opening if you didn't, and maybe even big injuries. So right there, my next really important flake is, as you can see, is getting in there and spending the time to get that slider nice and quartered. And that quartering that slider and the flake happen at the same time very often. So at that point, you can see my parachute's pretty well flaked. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of flaking between the C's and the D's. This is really good because this right here, this step right here, helps control your D lines and keep them nice and in tension. Keeping your C's and D's both in tension throughout the pack job are going to really reduce your chances of tension knots. Okay, so cleaning this up right here is really important if you're trying to prevent tension knots. Same thing, you do the same thing on the other side. You pull your brakes away so that you can get in there and separate between your C's and D's. Someone told me a lesson one time that parachutes don't malfunction. It's actual lines that malfunction. And if you think about it, most malfunctions come with problems between the lines in each other or the lines in the parachute. So the reason we're flaking a lot of this parachute out like that is we're trying to get the lines into the center and tight and the fabric out to the sides and away from the lines. It's kind of the general theory on the pack job. So I believe that was our flake. And so when you end up, it's going to look like that. A couple things to note is my grommets are facing inwards. You notice I didn't do anything with pulling the slider out, pulling the nose out, didn't stuff the slider in. I gently just pushed it down and the grommets are facing each other. Okay. I'm going to go back to my presentation now. Okay. Oh, wants to start over on me. All right. So then we're going to step here to this slide. And this is probably one of the most important things on our parachutes that I want to really accentuate on this pack job. And I want to accentuate to everybody that this is really important, okay? This is the step that I see if more people did, we would see a lot better heading performance and ease of controlling the parachute throughout the rest of the pack job. Basically, when we dress our inlets or our nose, we're going to treat it the exact same way you would treat a base parachute or reserve. We're going to leave the center cell exposed. We're going to take the outer cells and basically get them out of the way. What we're going to do with them is we're not trying to hide them from the airflow here as we pack the nose. We're trying to position them so that when we set this parachute down, they don't expose themselves or they don't move. And what you're going to see here does that job really nicely. It creates a nice flat surface to set them down. So what I'm going to show you here on a lower performance parachute, this is just a pretty standard 9 cell. And then we're going to show you on an Airwolf or an HK. I forget which one it is. See there, I'm accentuating that AB. I've grabbed all my inlets except my center one, and I just smooth it out. I create a nice flat surface there. Pull them all out. And just dress that center cell out like that. I keep the slider even with the grommets facing inwards. You'll see here I have a little bit. I need to clean this up. I'm going to get that a little bit straighter. See how I walk that up to the base of the inlet? And that flat part right there that I just ran my hand across, these two flat parts right here and here, getting those nice and flat is key. It has nothing to do with presentation to the air. When the wing hits the airstream, all of this has gone away usually. Doing this neatly is important because when you lay it on the ground, if you don't do this, things are going to move around in your pack job. And I would urge everyone that if you haven't ever, particularly on a new parachute, once you lay your wing down the first time, do the cocoon and put it in the bag, open it back up and look in it and look through your pack job and go, okay, this was looking good. This got moved around. And a lot of this pack job that I'm doing is, hey, first of all, it's a base or reserve pack job. But second, the finer points have all been found through going back through my pack jobs after I put them in a bag. I do it pretty routinely, and on a new prototype or a new wing, it's one of the first things I do on the wing is I do a test pack. I'm checking to make sure the brakes line up, but I'm also checking to make sure that my techniques, that when I open it back up, that it presents to me how I would want it to present to the airstream initially. Let's watch that same pack job on a higher performance wing. See, again, I'm just taking the outer cells. I'm not rolling them. I just turn them 180. And I turn them 180 just so I can take that flat part of the wing right there. When I lay it on the ground, that's going to lay flat, and that's going to lay flat. The snaps on our wings. Somebody's got on microphone. If you could turn that off, that'd be great. The snaps are not to slow down the openings. The snaps have been put in place so that they can hold the slider into that position and hold the wing into the position that we want you to pack it in. So that is the flat part. That is probably the most, if you're going to, as far as flaking and other stuff, getting that picture on our parachutes is the most important thing you can do. And in both these cases, you can see in particular, you can see right up here, the grommets are facing inwards. On that slider, I will clean that up before I put that in the bag, and those are going to be facing inwards. So let's talk about positioning the slider. You probably hear some people talk about pulling the slider out so it presents to the air. Some people want to do funky things with it. I've even seen people decide who wanted to pack their slider outside of the deployment bag because they wanted it to catch air first. Those are all really bad ideas, guys. There's one thing you need to do and do well for safety reasons is the slider needs to go into the correct position and remain there until it hits the airstream. Most of the really bad openings I've ever had the chance to look at on video have one thing in common, is they've deployed out of sequence and usually with the slider out of the picture, okay? So we're gonna show you how to quarter the slider here. But check and make sure that it's properly been uncollapsed and that you don't have big tabs sticking out anywhere so they can snag on anything. Oh, so I'm showing you that again. But also see here, the grommets are all facing in, and you notice that slider wasn't pulled out. It's allowed to hang just roughly flush. When you pull that slider out, if you decide to pull it out of the pack job, what happens is you take the really important part of the slider, which is way down between. It's in the center of the slider, the center of that fluid logo down at the bottom of the pack job, touching the bottom surface of the wing where it needs to be. And you scoot it out of the way and you give a pathway that when that parachute opens back up, it can allow air around it, right? So the important part here again is once you've put this slider and you positioned it and put it on the stops, it's really important that this slider stays where you put it for the rest of the pack job. If you think it's moved at any point during your pack job, stop and redo it. It's not worth it. A terminal opening with a slider that's not in position may not just give you a sore neck. It is in the past way more than hurt people. Okay, so this is a critical component here. So now that I've positioned my slider and I've gone ahead and positioned the flaking and I'm holding it all in place, I'm pretty gentle here, but I keep tension on stuff. I need to pull the tail around. I need to pull the tail around in a way that doesn't disturb the rest of my pack job. I want to talk first a little bit about keeping those lines tight and fixing some stuff at this point in your pack job, which is a really good tension knot prevention. I also want to talk a little bit about pulling the tail around so that you don't disturb any of your inlets or the stuff you've done just with your lines. And on a side note, this particular parachute has a warning label that's not on the middle of it because this is a prototype. It's something we're working on right now. I should have blurred out the logo, but anyway, let's watch the video. Okay, I'm gonna have to pull the video up on this one again. So hold on one sec, guys. Apologize, I'm having a little bit of trouble finding this video. I am not sure why I did not present here, but I will have a chance if I can't get it to show you during our live pack job that's very next. So I apologize. That video has ghosted me for some reason. I apologize, guys. I will cover that a little more thoroughly when I'm doing the pack job. The important part here is that when you pull the tail around, put your knee up and put your knee somewhere in this area so that when you pull it around, you don't pull any of these lines around. When you fold it, pin the top up near the top, right up here, and you pin that part of the parachute, and you only a couple rolls, just enough to cocoon this. This is not a technique that you're going to use to slow down openings. The slider is what slows down your openings. Good flaking, good slider control, and proper insertion into the bag are really what control the speed of your opening. Rolling the tail more or less is not going to affect it. I've never seen the tail play a big factor in any of our openings watching on video. When you pull it around, you're going to bring that up there. And once you lock this into position, you're going to use this to control the rest of the grommets for the rest of the pack job. Okay. So let's go to the next slide here. I'm going to show you a little bit about how I like to lay it down. So obviously I've cocooned it. You can see I'm going to control it. I'm going to squeeze a little bit of air out of it first. And then I'm going to control it with where I put the top part of the cocoon in. And again, you can see I've got my hand up here on the top of the pack job. I'm going to check a couple things. Like there's a couple checks here that I like to look at. Remember I pointed out the cascades on the brakes. And if you guys don't understand what that is, I can cover that a little bit better on the pack job. But it's the point where the lower brake line splits into the upper four brakes. I use those as a bookmark and as a place to tell, are my lines even? have I controlled my pack job and made it nice and even? If they're not, and for me personally, if they're more than about a centimeter off, I stop and fix it. Next thing I don't allow is I don't allow any slop in the lines. I'm not going to allow loose lines. If I lost line tension before I laid it down, I go back up, pick it up, fix that line tension. You cannot fix line tension once it's been laid on the ground. Whatever you do, unless you're a really good base packer and understand, the best place to fix it is standing up. Then I'm going to use once I lay it down, I'm going to control the width and dress it down to get it, put it in the bag. But you'd be surprised the number of people I see just flop this down on the ground. Okay, that's not what we want to be doing. See how gently? Lay it down very slow. Notice my hand didn't break from that spot. I controlled that pack job. I go back, check my 2 cascade points. They're even. And I come up. So I'd like to point one thing out. You notice that there's not a ton of air billowing out of this pack job, and my warning label and tail are flat. Okay? If you're laying your parachute down and there's a big billow and a bulb of air right there, chances are your slider is moving as you squish the air out. So I generally will hold it against my chest after I've brought the tail around and get a little bit of the air out while there's still gravity helping pull the slider and the lines into position. And then when I get to here, I've got a nice presentable package. So this is actually my video for tuning it and laying it down. So I'm going to skip over here we're going to talk a little bit about folding it. I want to touch on this, and then we're going to go back and watch that video. But as we're folding, it's really important that we keep tension on the top center. The lines are tight and symmetrical, and that we want to keep control of the slider before we put the S fold in. And so we want to end up with this over here, this package right here, right? So let's go back and look at the previous video and understand what that's supposed to look like to get to there. So I've checked it. So I've got a nice wide ice cream cone is what we call it when we're debriefing videos, sometimes the pack job or the cocoon. So a couple things to note when I push the air out right here. First is I push the air out of the center, right? The reason I push the air out of the center of the parachute there is that's where all my lines should be. My line should stay in the center of this parachute in this area right here. Next thing you'll notice is that I actually fold. I don't stuff. I fold and I create a nice firm crease. I gather both sides of the parachute. I've got that bottom or that top surface between my forefinger and my thumb wrapped underneath, and I fold that too. So at this point, I've folded the parachute on each side, right? And I'm not stuffing ever. I've got tension on both sides. And I can sit right there because I'm putting tension on this top skin and hold this position forever. I mean, it's comfortable. I'm not pushing down. I'm spreading the force. All right. So to get to that next spot, so we're going to start there. And this is a bit of the art form here. So this is where most people seem to lose their pack job. I would argue that a lot of people have lost their pack job before this, but if you're going to do this fold right here, you notice the most important part of all of this is you're trying to do two things. You're trying to get it down so you can fit it in the bag. But number one, keep tension on your lines and control that slider. If you lose control of your slider, it's going to be a bad day. So when you do this, I recommend that people put the S fold in just like this, not do the technique where you put it in the bag and then put the S fold. I think the chances of moving your slider out of the pack job or out of its original position are much higher if you do anything but this. Now, there is an alternative to this method that we use on really small parachutes with short cord lengths, where we skip that initial S-fold that I first showed you. And I can talk about that on a higher performance parachute pack job. You also see when I folded the wing in the previous step, if you don't fold, you can't grab, see where the pointer's going, where I'm grabbing with my hands? You can actually see the fold and the fold right there. Where my hand is placed, I'm actually able to grab and control the top surface all the way around and create tension that way by grabbing that neatly there, because I folded instead of stuffing. And I'm going to control it, press down a little bit, and then here on this part of the parachute, I'm using that pressure right there to still control my slider, right? And I've put my knees down here to control that and have it not squirt out. And again, I'm using a little pressure down and with the front of my knees to control that slider. I'm going to put my knees on it and spread the pack job on that top surface out to each side. If you haven't cocked your pilot chute, you got to do it by now. You can cock it now, you can cock it later. You got to know a little trick to do it there, but it's easy. Now we got to put it in the bag. So you see that step right there? Let's go back a couple frames. Right there. You guys see that trick? You see how I've got my thumb, and then I've got tension on the top part between my knee and my thumb right there. And I'm controlling the bottom of the parachute. I'm going to take that and stick it all the way down in the corner of the bag. Placing that in the corner of the bag just gives me good leverage to take the next one and do the exact same thing. Okay. Parachutes like to be put in the bag square. If you've accidentally put a small twist in the parachute at this point, square it up. Really will change your heading performance. So let's talk about stowing our lines and getting the bag closed, because that's also really important. So number one thing, particularly on a semi-stowless bag, it's really important that you stow your lines tightly and get that bag closed. Looking at a lot of openings on parachutes, the worst openings that you see are, again, out of sequence. And one way to get an out of sequence deployment is to have your bag open before it should be. And that could expose your wing to the airflow before it's completely finished putting line tension on or unstowing the lines. So getting good bag closure with a double stow on the lines is really important. Obviously, this doesn't apply to tandems, but every other parachute out there, I would recommend double stow on large rubber bands. Get the grommet as close to the bag as possible to keep the parachute contained. Okay? And then we'll talk about stowing lines in a second. I want you guys to kind of watch what we expect to see when we're putting this in the bag. See how I control it with my knees right there? Pull that grommet all the way down to the stop if I can. Stows. Inch and a half. You do a stow that's 2 or 3 inches, something else can loop through it. Okay? Too big is as big a problem as too small. Okay, so create tension, double stow. All right. So get the grommet, get the bag closed, get the parachute in the corners of the bag, inch to inch and a half line stows, and double stow them. Get that bag nice and closed. The rest of this has to do with the semi-stowless bag right here. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks on how this was designed to be packed. You're going to see me hop up, put my knees on it, push it down in the pack job nice and neatly. I'm going to lay the flap out. Then I'm going to do cascadingly smaller free stows. The idea on that is you start with the biggest stow and you work your way in the hopes that the stuff that's coming out first can't loop around something that's coming out last. I actually separate my lines, and again, I check those break cascades again. And if they're not even, I will redo my step. So again, I just take a nice bite. I run the line straight back down into the pouch. Take a fold. Take another fold. And you'll see each one of these gets a little bit smaller. Control your lines. Keep them neat. You don't have to make it your life's work to make it super, super neat. But you shouldn't have stray lines, and they shouldn't be all over the place, guys. Stow your lines when you're using a semi-stowless bag all the way up as close as you can to the risers. You can pull out or milk out any excess you need as you put it in the container. You stow all the way up to this point because traditionally in older pack jobs, we would leave extra line out so that the speed of the bag, the differential speed between the bag and the jumper, was great enough that it could overcome that first line stow. Well, on a semi-stowless bag, you don't have any big force peaks to overcome. So you can go ahead and stow all the way up there and only pull out what you need so that you're not leaving lines sitting in the bottom of the tray where they can entangle things like closing loops, flaps, stuff like that. And that is our basic pack job.